Hey everyone, welcome to another Developer Spotlight video here at Mapbox. And today I'm here with Anthony Goddard of ZeroSixZero. And Anthony, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So my name's Anthony. I run a company called ZeroSixZero, and we make adventure maps, maps for people who are doing like ultra endurance adventures.
Awesome. Can you give us a little showcase of what ZeroSixZero can do and some of the projects you've worked on?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so we build maps for people who are doing reasonably crazy things. This is an example of a guy called Jamie McDonald, who also goes by the name Adventure Man. And he ran a few years ago around the United States. So he did, I think, 210 marathons back to back. He was pushing, as you can see here, this little baby cart full of his belongings and had quite an adventure. Here's an example of a South Pole map that we've recently done. This is a girl called Preet Chandy, who just became set the record for the longest unsupported, unassisted polar journey in history, which was pretty incredible. That was 70 days and 922 miles she did there. So what we do is we try to take whatever somebody is doing, whatever adventure they're doing, and build a map that expresses kind of in an obvious way what they're doing. So in this case, you can see this person was hauling a sledge from this location to the South Pole to this location. In Jamie's case, you can see he was running, pushing a little baby cart all the way from the Olympic Peninsula around the US across to Massachusetts. Yeah, so this is a map of a gentleman called Jonas Deichmann, and a couple of years ago he did a worldwide triathlon. And so again, we want to make it obvious when you look at the map exactly what's going on. So you can see this guy's probably on a bicycle. So while it was live, he cycled, if we zoom out here, I think he went this way actually. Yeah, so he cycled down here to the Adriatic Sea. He swam. Oh, this blue line is the swimming. So you can see, there was sections. Actually, there's probably a cool section where he crossed to an island. Yeah, down here. And then, yeah, they say swimming. And then he got back on the bike, cycled. He actually cycled through Siberia in the winter. So if you look him up online, you can see he had quite a big beard and it's just full of ice. And then if we keep going, he then traveled across to Mexico and he ran Mexico, and then started again on the west coast of Europe and ended back where he started. There's 28,000 kilometers. This is another one of the challenges that we have mapping these sorts of adventures, is that there's many different ways of measuring distance. And sometimes, if people aren't pinging rapidly enough, they might be doing, if we look here in the Alps, there'll be some switchbacks. If we're not getting data fast enough, then we're going to discount, all of these little turns. And over 28,000 kilometers, that can add up to thousands of kilometers, actually, depending on how slow the tracker is. So what we try to do there is we get as much data as we can from them during the expedition. Here's probably a good example of a curve. But then we can also backfill if they have data that they can add later. And in the ideal case, we'll have a satellite tracker, and we'll have something like they'll have a Garmin on their bike, and when they sync to Garmin, it'll push that data to us. So we'll combine the satellite data and the Garmin data, so we get the best of both worlds. We get the live data and the super accurate high-res data.
That would all happen after the fact, or maybe like just on a less frequent basis?
Yeah, we can do it. We can do it pretty quickly. So typically somebody will start their cycling computer at the start of the day and press stop at the end of the day. As soon as they press stop, it'll do the syncing. It'll push to Garmin. We'll get it from Garmin automatically and put it on the map. So, but if they decided, if they stopped for lunch and they stopped the activity when they stopped for lunch, then we would backfill everything up till lunch straight away.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, everyone is familiar these days with all these larger companies that you can send all your data to, and they'll make these, interfaces for, but it's fascinating to see, how they can end up into their own, in their, with somebody like you as a developer who knows how to make maps and do all the infrastructure, you can do a whole lot more with it if you can make your own custom interface. So that's pretty wild.
Yeah, and there's not a lot out there for people who are doing these. Like, I mean, there's limited things for multi-day expeditions, let alone
Yeah.
like multi-continent expeditions. Yeah, this actually we haven't updated yet to the globe style. I think the globe style came out while we were doing this. I have another example. Yeah, here's one. This is actually a live run right now. And using the globe style, I think it really adds that extra element. I think of people understanding, just like what an epic run something like this might be.
Fascinating.
There's an example I had here. So, I said before, one thing that we try to do is we try to make it really obvious. You look at the map and you know what the person is doing. And we got this ping, I think it was back in 2016, by a woman who was going to run the length of New Zealand. And she was also a comic artist. And she sort of drew a map and she said, can you make a map that kind of looks like this? And if I find, this is an expedition of hers that's, she started last year, but she'll be starting again, I think, this year. It had to get cut short. But basically she was like, can we have my drawing as the marker? And we're like, yeah, of course we can have the drawing as the marker. But then we thought, what else could we take? And this is something that Mapbox Studio really made incredible for us, which was we took her handwriting and we made a font out of it. And so initially the idea was like, could I just draw the main locations? If I'm going from Cairo to Cape Town, I'll draw Cairo as a marker in Cape Town. And we thought, why not just make it so if you go all the way in and you look at a street name, we can also make it so the street names are done in your handwriting, which was pretty wild. And so this sort of aesthetic, we wanted to have this sort of cartoony, wild map, I think with her handwriting on it as well, is something that I think she was pretty excited about, and we were pretty excited about being able to build. Yeah, this is probably another example of that same thing, customization using Mapbox Studio. So this is K2. And this is a winter ascent of K2, or an attempt at a winter ascent of K2. And one of the things that's difficult for us sometimes with maps is if somebody is going to be doing something, let's say in northern Canada or the high Arctic, or Iceland perhaps, and the map content that we have shows the summer, it's really not telling the story. And because we're really striving to try to take the person there and show exactly what they're doing. If somebody's skiing, across Greenland in the snow, but we're showing that they're skiing across what looks like a desert in the summertime, it's not going to do that job. So what we do sometimes here is, and what we've done here is, I think we have 2 layers, if I can remember this one correctly. Yeah, so we have like a lower resolution. You can see like the actual satellite tiles that came from Mapbox summertime. So we have this lower resolution winter imagery. So we start the map, no further than around here. So the surrounding area is snow, and then we have higher resolution Landsat imagery here. So when they're actually looking at the winter ascent, you can see it, as close to what it would look like, I think, in winter as possible.
Fascinating. So yeah, this wonderful example of bringing your own data to get around the limitations of global data sets that may not serve your specific use case. So
yeah,
absolutely love it. And is that something also that you cut these are just raster tiles that you do you host them in some special way, or are they just static and just live with your project?
In some cases we will, depending on how big the data set is and how much time we have, in some cases we'll serve our own raster tiles, and in some cases we'll combine them with sources from Mapbox. In some cases we'll just serve the the raster tiles separately. I think in this case, we did this all in Studio. So in cases where we just need like a little, I mean, we probably, if we have more time, could probably touch this up and smooth out the edges there. But I think we imported a bunch of raster geotiffs here and did it through Studio. This one, yeah. So this one too, this uses a few different GLJS-y things. So you could see, I don't know if you saw there where it loaded, but you saw just for a second. Then we apply a mask. So this is Iceland, and again, this was a winter crossing in Iceland. And so what we did was we looked for Landsat data that we could show Iceland in the snow. The challenge was you couldn't really see the outline of the country easily. The rest of the image was pretty hectic. So we masked it out using just a vector mask of the country. And then we found it had to be cloudless, but also totally snow covered. So we found some imagery, Landsat imagery that gave us that. And what we do here is sort of a bit of a, we try to compromise where looking at the overview, you can see, this was a ski that was attempting to cross the country in the winter. So we wanted to show that it was wintertime, but we don't have any, it's hard to get high resolution winter imagery. And we don't want to just stop the map here. We want people to be able to see, once they zoom in. So once you zoom in here, you do get to the summer imagery, and you can see how much of a difference that is. But the compromise is sort of like, well, people get it, it's snowy, but if they really want to see, the terrain, like this person's at a river or something, then they can zoom on, the houses here. Yeah.
Awesome. So you're exemplifying every little aspect of control that you get with Mapbox GL. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we're really trying to use the tools to their fullest where we can. So this is another one that really helped from the globe style. So this is a adventurer called Matt Dawson, who's doing a project called 7 for Soldiers, where it's just an incredible number of expeditions all in a single project. So it has a North Pole ski, South Pole ski, climbing there's a series called the Explorers Grand Slam, where you climb the highest mountain on the 7 continents, or the 7 summits, last degree North Pole, last degree South Pole. But he's also adding, a bunch of additional, there's a round the world flight, there's an Atlantic row. So this was really like a huge project for us to try to think about how we could visualize all of that in a way that made sense. And so we did some of the same things. If we look at, let's say Denali, for example, we have the winter imagery of Denali. Sorry, I'm not sure if he did it in the winter. I guess he did it in June, but we had, I think in this case, the imagery was kind of just blown out and hard to see. So we brought in this imagery. But so we added some navigation here, to fly to the different locations using the fly to in GLJS. I think during this expedition, Mapbox's high resolution satellite data set got updated with the new data. So this is some of these places like Kili, it's super high resolution. It looks beautiful.
Oh, these are amazing. Can you tell us more about your infrastructure and how you prep and serve data to power these maps?
Yeah, so I put together the world's worst flowchart. Basically, what we start with is satellite tracker data. That might be APIs that we have access to with providers. In some cases, somebody will have some tracker we've never heard of, and we'll either have to figure it out or work with the provider. Phone apps that can send data in real time. They're helpful, in expeditions that have access to the battery charging. With phones, we can send data, once every second to update the map. Any other APIs that we can fetch things from, so that could be things like Garmin or Strava, or anywhere that has geographic data for the customer. And then we can have customers just do custom uploads, so uploading GPX files, things like that. It all feeds into our backend, and we store everything in PostGIS, Postgres. I put this over here. One thing that's important for the work that we do is that every position is kind of auditable. People use this data for validation of world records and things like that. And so we will collect more data from a satellite tracker than we will use in the front end app. Let's say the battery percentage at the time or something like that we will collect. We won't use it here, but we'll store as faithfully as we can all of the records that we received in sort of an audit storage. And that means at the end of the expedition, when people reach out and they say, can you give me an archive of, you know, all of my data, we can put that together and they can use that to validate their record. We then take, you know, this is just part of the data that we use. We then take additional data. It might be weather data, for example, that will ping APIs to fetch. It might be systems that the customer has themselves. That could be anything like a blog or you know, WordPress, or it could be in some cases Google Doc spreadsheets, things like that, where they're storing data. And we'll also bring in media files. So these could be YouTube videos, they could be custom videos that have been uploaded, photos, anything like that. So we combine these two together. And then the sort of journey the data takes to get to the output. So output's generally just our React app that uses GLJS. We also sometimes put together APIs for sponsors. The thing that's important for that is sometimes, you know, people want to get a lot of data on the map, and we love it when we can put data on the map because everything happened at a place at a time. And so there's a place for, I think, all of the content on the map, but sometimes things get a little busy. And if we have a expedition website that's referencing in different places, like how far perhaps the expedition has gone, we like to serve that from our data. So our map and the website data both shows, for example, the same distance traveled, things like that. So the two main outputs would be those APIs for sponsors and then our GLJS React app. And to prepare the data to get there, you know, we'll bring in data from Mapbox Studio. Oftentimes we'll bring in the full style from Mapbox Studio. In some cases, we'll use our own tiles, or we'll supplement the studio data with our tiles. We'll also, in some cases, just bring in just arbitrary GeoJSON. Sometimes that's vectored data sets for things like the country outlines. Sometimes it'll be, you know, those positions on the map, labels on the map, or routes, those types of things. We also do a bunch of simplification and data cleanup. The biggest challenge we have with data cleanup is, you know, it's really important for us to get whatever data we can get if somebody is in a remote location and they don't have good signal quality or things like that. But if we have a choice, so let's say they send a GPS position, oftentimes GPS devices will let you know how accurate the position was recorded, so within 500 meters or within a kilometer. If we only got one position in the middle of nowhere with a kilometer accuracy, we'll use that position. But if we then get 10 more and they have 20-meter accuracy, then we'll filter out the low accuracy. And it's important because if somebody stays in the same place with a low accuracy signal and that thing's pinging, you know, every few seconds, 100 meters here, 100 meters there, then even those will add considerably to the statistics. You know, while they're asleep, it'll think they traveled miles. So we do a lot of work to clean up the data there. And then simplification obviously is important for us too. When we have, you know, 200,000 or 300,000 GPS points on a map, we want to make sure that we can serve it. It's very important for us to serve it quickly. And a lot of our traffic is on mobile. And we just do not ever want to have like one of those timer slide, you know, a countdown, you know, get ready for the map experience thing. And so we do simplify, but we make sure that we do it in a way that's going to be faithful to the actual expedition. Obviously, something like a South Pole, it's super easy. But, you know, some of these simplification algorithms are so good that even on those switchbacks, like I showed you before, they'll get it right.
Is that so? Is that like ST simplify and PostGIS, or is there more going on there?
Yeah, it's funny.
out of the database.
I think we've done every possible different way. Same with measuring lines.
Yep.
I think we've done this 1,000 different ways to measure distances between things. And oftentimes, what we'll do is we'll put together, let's say with distance measuring or simplification, we'll do all of them, and then we'll compare them. And in most cases, I think it's the funny thing about geographic systems is the term accuracy means different things to different people. And sometimes, if we really want to measure a line, it's really important if somebody went 8,000 miles that we say they went 8,000 and not 7,900. But I think, accuracy as far as PostGIS is concerned is sometimes the difference between centimeters. Like we don't really care so much about centimeters. So we'll do a lot of these comparisons, and then we'll find that 90% of them are just disagreeing on centimeters. But there'll be outliers that disagree a lot more. I think at the moment we do some simplification using on the front end in JavaScript, and then we serve simplified data that is definite. It would definitely be using the Postgres simplification, and then we also do polyline encoding of those.
So on this slide, you've relegated your entire front end to one little blue box. Obviously, there's a whole lot more that goes into it. So my next question is, how do you approach design? Because you already showed us so many examples of, different custom icons and different symbologies and different zoom-dependent styles. Do you have a process? How do you approach that when you are working with a client to show their story in the right way?
Yeah. So this was a very simple question in the very beginning for us, which was what we were, our sort of competitors at the time when we started were either people just not using maps. So we just wanted to get them tracking their adventure and sharing it. But a lot of the providers of things like satellite trackers, for example, they care a lot about what's happening right now. They don't care too much about what might have happened in the last week. And so what we used to see is, in fact, the reason we started building these maps was there was a gentleman who was running from the north coast of the UK to the south coast, running the length of the UK. And I think he was somewhere in Scotland, and it showed him as only having traveled, half the distance from the start point. And I thought, that doesn't make sense. He's telling us that he's running the length of the country, but he's clearly not running the length of the country. And then when I looked at it closer, I realized that the provider that he was using only showed like the last 1 week of data, like running 1 week of data. And so, I thought it was horrible because this person's doing something that's amazing. I didn't know someone could run the length of a country back then. That just seems like ludicrous. And to be doing something that was so incredible and to be telling for the story to be mistold, I think was a huge disservice to him, and would be to anyone doing that. And so to design in the beginning, it was simply like, all we need to do is actually tell the truth. And so it's not a dot moving, it's a person. They haven't traveled only 30 miles, they've traveled 300 miles. And it was funny looking back because, probably in some way the map itself wasn't really relevant so much back then. I think we probably even used like a subdued, like a Cardo positron light. It was probably just a very, very basic map. And thankfully things have changed, I think, since, and people really expect things to look great. And so typically what we start with customers is how can we describe what they're doing easily. And so in a case where it's winter imagery, we'll try to tell the story. If they're rowing in an ocean that has icebergs, we'll try to stick some ice in the ocean, things like that. Oftentimes, the vast majority of the adventures that we map are people running across a state or running across a country or something, and we'll typically just use the satellite imagery is so good that we'll use that. But often people will see other maps that we've built before and they'll like the aesthetic for that, for example. So what we do when we start working with the customer is we'll give them just like maybe 4 or 5 different options if they're not sort of leading us in a particular direction. And in 90% of cases, they'll love one of those and we'll go with that. sometimes there'll be part of the story that isn't told by that. An example I can think of is somebody is running through the UK, and they are going to climb the tallest hill in every national park. And so the national parks in that case are a really important part of the story, as are the hills and their elevation. And so in those cases, we will, get a list from them of what those places are and what the hills are. We'll look for open data that we can fetch and put on the map. We'll do things like outline the national parks, things like that. So it really, the design decision is always, how can somebody looking at this map know straight away what this person is doing?
Awesome. And I mean, I'm just curious because it looks like I assume your backend is reliable and mature. And is that something you have to spend a lot more time on as you've grown the company? And can you focus a lot more on, on really customizing that story for each client? How does that balance work?
Yeah, so that was actually, in the very beginning, that map I was telling you about in the UK, I built like a Rails app just to do that back then. And then somebody else came along and they wanted a map. And so we built another Rails app. And that got hectic. It was like literally copy, duplicate the code base, and we'd have 10 maps would be 10 Rails apps. And so there's been a lot of work on that back-end app over the years to automate things. There's still probably a lot of work to do. I spend a lot of time just in the console, like, editing maps and doing repetitive tasks. But the idea with that backend definitely is that it does the heavy lifting. If somebody called today and said, I need to, put a map together urgently, it would be the bulk of what we would do is already baked into that backend. So, we just plug in some data and get going. Yeah. And yeah, as you said, that really does let us, when we don't have to worry about writing all the boilerplate code just for serving the maps, that lets us spend our time doing the fun stuff.
Excellent. And it seems like you've been making web maps for a very long time, and maybe even before web, making other maps. So can you give us kind of your recollection of the good old days? What's changed? What are you most excited about that's on the horizon? Just how's that web mapping journey been for you?
Yeah, I think, looking back at what seemed really cool 10 years ago, for example, with like Leaflet and Google Maps, and to see how far we've come from there, being able to jump into a GeoJS map, zoom in, spin around, do animations, get the high resolution imagery, the 3D stuff. Like it's incredible, given that we've always been trying to accurately tell the story of what the person is doing. All of those things make it just easier and easier for us to do. So I think that like how far we've come in terms of the tools like GLJS, and just like the number of people out there who are doing really cool things, really cool stuff with OpenStreetMap, really cool things with open data. I think that's been super exciting. That's definitely been awesome to be a part of, I think, the community, and then also just to see what's changed.
All right, well, thanks Anthony for sharing everything about ZeroSixZero, and those of you who are interested in replicating some of the things that he's done here and some of these techniques, or are interested in being a customer and want to map your adventures, you can reach out to us and figure out how to get in touch with him. And thank you so much for joining us today, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome.